For reasons I've talked about before, cast iron cookware has a large and passionate fan base. And just like in any community, myths, misunderstandings, and misinformation tend to bubble to the surface. Some of these things turn out to be at least partly true, and others total malarkey. I have my own opinions about a lot of these claims, but I won't pretend that I'm always right, and I'm going to do my best to investigate each of these claims with as little bias as possible. And this poor little lodge here is going to help me investigate a lot of these claims. And by the end of this video, this skillet may literally explode. Here we go. And I'm not someone who says the word literally in a figurative way, so stick around for that. A lot of these claims are about seasoning, which is a mysterious and magical process that understandably invites myth and misunderstanding. Put simply, over time, hot oil binds together chemically in your skillet, turning into a hard, protective, and non-stick layer bonded to the iron itself. Watch my seasoning video next if you want to know more about it. For many of these investigations, I'll be testing with two Lodge skillets. One is nearly new with the factory seasoning, and the other I've polished very smooth and organically built the seasoning over the last several months. Super common claim. Now I use dish soap on my iron, not every time, but often. And I've never noticed it harm my seasoning one bit. So for this test, I used a generous squirt of soap and even soaked for 5 minutes in the suds. I found no effect. This was with the conventional, modern, sudsing dish soap. And of course, if you're using something more physically or chemically harsh, like Barkeeper's Friend or Lye, you'll do damage. But Dawn, you're fine. Before you ask, no, I didn't do any at-home laboratory testing on this one. I just read the existing research so I could sum it up for you. Yes, iron does leach into the food you cook, which is good for most people, and especially good if you're iron deficient, which a lot of people are. It is rare, but if you have high iron levels in your body, the iron leaching into your food from cast iron may be harmful. The amount of iron leached in each meal depends mostly on the acidity of the food you're cooking and the strength of your seasoning layer. Studies have shown that new or poorly seasoned pans can release 5 to 10 times more iron than well-seasoned ones when cooking the same food. Simmering tomato sauce in an unseasoned pan, you'll get up to 10 to 20 milligrams of extra iron per cup of sauce. Pan frying some tofu in your new Lodge, likely less than a milligram in total. The recommended daily iron intake is 8 milligrams a day for adult men and 18 milligrams each day for adult women. Now you ought not air dry your skillet, as letting water sit on the iron is likely to cause rust. And many people will tell you that you should reheat your skillet to quickly evaporate every last water molecule after washing. I don't have time for all that. But you know what I do have? Towels. That's what I do. I towel dry my iron and then apply a thin, fresh layer of cooking oil. Never had a problem. This is a take that surprised me when I first heard it. Iron is tough. That's part of why we like it. What's the point if I have to treat it like it's fragile? Some viewers have pointed out that they see the scratches in my seasoning when I scrape with a metal spatula, but that's just the surface oil smudging, not scratches. But then I got this new fish spatula that has a sharper edge than my usuals, and that's what caused these actual scratches in my sanded smooth skillet with the weaker seasoning. So yes, it's certainly possible. What if you just cut your steak with a knife inside your skillet? Well, that'll scratch too. Yes, it will even scratch through that tough factory Lodge seasoning. Though, after a couple of cooks, I will say that it filled in and became invisible. The fish spatula with the sharp edges had little noticeable effect on the Lodge, and if you're using a spatula with a dull or rounded edge, you shouldn't have to worry about it at all. To test this, I boiled several cups of water nearly to nothing. After reapplying a surface layer of oil, I don't see any difference. Will I now be boiling water for my tea in my skillet? No, you end up with oily, irony water. Some things stainless steel or an electric kettle are just better at. I'll also still be making my soups in stainless, but if you only have iron available, I wouldn't worry about it harming your seasoning. Unless it's tomato soup. As I mentioned before, acidic foods like tomatoes will cause more iron leaching, but does it also strip seasoning? To test this, I simmered some cheap canned tomato sauce for a good hour. And this actually did have a visual impact on the weaker seasoned pan. The color in the center clearly changed from amber back to the silver of a bare polished iron surface. I can't see any visual impact on the thick Lodge factory seasoning, but still, this one is I hoped I'd be proving this one wrong when I polished this skillet smooth, but as you can see, the seasoning is pretty uneven. I polished this up to 220 grit with an orbital sander. I did 4 cycles of initial seasoning with flax oil, then cooked on it consistently for months since. Now don't get me wrong, it's fine. As long as I don't do things like simmered tomato sauce, it cooks great. It's just not very pretty. Compare that to this vintage Wagner that I also stripped, reseasoned, and cooked on consistently. Beautiful and smooth, but not as smooth as my polished one, and it seems that there's a sweet spot of smoothness that I overshot with this guy. If I was to do it again, I'd try stopping around 80 grit. Here's an example of a factory new smooth skillet. This cook life is smooth but still has these small ridges and some microscopic roughness from the machining process that I now believe helps the seasoning bind. Factory seasoning is not universal. Different manufacturers have different processes, and each cook has their own preferences. And I've seen that Lodge, the most common iron you're likely to see, has a very thick coat of seasoning right from the factory, which is very different from anything I've ever achieved at home. As you've seen in the test so far, it's tough, and unless it's been messed up somehow, I don't recommend stripping it and reseasoning. If you're enough of a seasoning snob to want to do that, then you probably already have better pieces to your liking. There have long been rumors that some disreputable cast iron brands, often from Asia, it is said, are contaminated by lead and/or cadmium or other heavy metals. While it's possible that cast iron cookware made from recycled materials could be contaminated in this way, I haven't been able to find confirmed incidences of this happening. What has been confirmed is that enameled cast iron can pose a genuine risk, depending on the brand and the enamel quality. I don't use enameled iron for many reasons, this being one of them. The other thing to watch out for is cast iron cookware that you don't know the history of, as sometimes they have been used to melt down lead for making bullets or fishing weights, etc. Still, I wouldn't worry about new, bare cast iron. This Chinese-made Cook Life skillet, for example, is made from primary iron, not recycled iron, and has tested free of contaminants. I'm not sure where this belief comes from, but I've heard it pretty often. I think humans just like high numbers. In order to polymerize an oil onto the surface of your iron to create seasoning, however, you need to heat it higher than the smoke point temperature so that polymerization will occur. So if you have a very high smoke point oil like avocado oil and a weak oven, it may not do the job. A low smoke point oil like flax is more foolproof. This one, it's too big for the scope of this video, and I don't believe there's a definitive answer to be found, but comment if you do want this one to have its own video. People love their vintage cast iron, and I'm no exception. No matter which shiny new piece I get, I always end up back with my Wagners. These tend to be light and smoother than even the more posh, polished, modern pieces. One reason for this is that companies like Griswold and Wagner used very fine, almost powdery sand molds for their cookware. This gave the castings an incredibly smooth finish, requiring little to no grinding or polishing afterward. And the cooking surfaces were glass-like, even before seasoning. But that ultra-fine sand was often silica-based, and inhaling crystalline silica dust is highly hazardous. It can cause silicosis, an incurable lung disease, and increase risk of lung cancer. Over time, as health regulations improved, especially mid to late 20th century, safety standards to protect the workers tightened. That's one story, anyway. I've heard several narratives, some from commenters on this channel. But whatever the reasons, today's foundries like Lodge use coarser, safer sands that have advantages like that safety and also lower cost, of course. But many think that the end product is inferior. I am one of those people, but it's really a matter of preference. I'm fighting all my instincts on this one. Boiling water is one thing, but putting cast iron in the dishwasher, that's something I never thought I would do. But here we go. Lodge factory seasoning, polished Lodge, weak, ugly seasoning. Here we go. So the claim about dishwashers being bad for cast irons is for two reasons. One, the detergent used in dishwashers, it's different and harsher than the sudsing dish soap you would use to wash by hand. And second, because it spends several hours in the dishwasher in that moist environment. Like I said before, long exposure to moisture is not good for iron. It's been in here for about 3 hours. Let's see how it's doing. Oh, those are hot. First glance, not as bad as I was fearing. Okay. Ooh, that's uglier. Starting with the polished Lodge, it does look splotchy. It does look pretty ugly. I can see the very beginnings of rust starting to develop. I don't know if you can see it in video or not, but I'm definitely gonna need to put some work in on this piece if I wanna continue cooking with it. Now, the factory seasoned Lodge, this is without any oil added afterwards. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty unaffected. So I'm gonna call this confirmed, but if you have a factory seasoned Lodge or similar piece, it's not that big of a deal. But I still wouldn't recommend doing it routinely. So this is after doing some scrubbing and oiling on the polished pan. And you know, not as bad as I was expecting. Really didn't take long to scrub and oil it afterwards. And after seeing that, honestly, I'm gonna have to downgrade this one to... I still am not gonna be using the dishwasher on my cast irons, but if it happens to yours, it seems like it's no big deal. It's time for the final piece of skillet abuse. Thermal shock is what occurs when there's a sudden and extreme change in temperature. It causes different parts of a given material to expand or contract at different rates, and this variability in expansion and contraction can cause warping, cracking, even complete fracture. Now, these old Corningware casserole dishes that you used to see everywhere are made from pyroceram, which is extremely resistant to thermal shock. You can take one of those right out of the freezer, pop it in a hot oven, no problem. But iron is much less resistant to thermal shock. To find out just how vulnerable a skillet can be, we heated this Lodge for 10 minutes over a propane burner, then dipped it into a bucket of cold water. Here we go. I didn't hear an explosion. It was anticlimactic.
No, and I expected to see a lot more steam and sizzle.
You won the bet.
That is a very much intact cast iron skillet.
Doesn't even look like it's been abused.
Now I know this wasn't a perfect experiment. Skillet could have been hotter, water could have been colder, but what actually did happen was so anticlimactic that I've got to call this one. But I couldn't allow the video to end that way, so
Okay.
ready. Oh!
Go from demo.
Good as new.